So far away, Nisha. I know you can't see it, but are you proud of me for putting up my own green screen?
Yeah, very proud.
Yeah, I did it myself. The X-Files is primarily a show about two extremely fuckable FBI agents wandering around America solving mysteries and shit. On occasion, plot happens. Plot, it turns out, was largely pulled out of the writers' arses, which resulted in them, amongst other things, promoting a random extra from the first season into the series' main overarching villain.
Okay, Karl, so who is this villain that you're talking about?
That villain is a character known by fans as Cigarette Smoking Man, and he does have a name, but I'm not going to tell you what it is because Cigarette Smoking Man is way cooler. And like many villains in many shows, Cigarette Smoking Man's backstory was expanded upon, which including revealing his name, which I think was a mistake, because he's way cooler when he's just some mysterious government guy you know nothing about. But throughout the X-Files, Cigarette Smoking Man is hinted to have had his smelly tobacco-stained fingers in every conspiracy-flavoured pie you can think of. For example, in one episode it's hinted that he helped assassinate JFK, whereas in another he helps fake the moon landing. In addition, he's also shown to hang out with aliens on the reg and has been killed multiple times only to return like a slasher villain, because X-Files fucking goes places in later seasons.
That seems to be like a regular thing with shows like that. They'll start off where they have like different plots in every episode, like it's a completely different story, and then the longer they go on, they have like an underlying plot.
And the longer the show goes on, the more convoluted the plot has to become because they can't solve it just yet. And I believe, Nisha, you are a fan of Supernatural, yes?
Yes.
Which had exactly this happen to it. Now, how many seasons is it now?
It's on its 15th and final season.
Fucking 15 seasons! Jesus! Isn't Supernatural one of those shows? I've not watched much of it, but I do know that it was supposed to end after the 5th season, and there's even a final episode of the 5th season which wraps everything up, if I'm right.
I think so.
I believe as a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours who's really into it, and he hates the show because there's this very obvious ending to the series in season 5 or 6 or around there, but then the show was really popular, so they just brought it back. And X-Files is similar, where they have had on multiple occasions like a definitive ending for the show, then they bring it back, and they even wrote out Fox Mulder's character for a bit, and then they committed the cardinal sin, and they made Mulder and Scully get together in one episode. It's like, well, it's done.
Oh no.
I have no interest in the show anymore. The will they, won't they is now they have, so it's not fun, and I hate when shows do that. The idea that these people can just have a platonic friendship was really interesting, and there can be some sexual tension there with the moment they act upon it and they put it in the show and canonise it. It's like, well, now it's not fun or interesting. Like the show Bones, I think had sexual tension between the two main characters in that show for several seasons, and all the fans wanted them to get together. The moment those two characters got together, ratings nosedived. People don't want what they want. People don't know what the fuck they want. Anyway.
Alright, so bringing it back to the cigarette smoking man.
Yes.
You mentioned he dies several times.
Yeah, he dies on multiple occasions. My favourite one being, I think he gets hit by a rocket launcher in one episode, and he comes back. One of the things I like about the X-Files, though, is that while plot does happen, which we'll get to in a moment, for the most part, it is a literal Monster of the Week show. Like, X-Files is basically just adult Scooby-Doo, because every episode is just a standalone spooky adventure. And one of the things I like about the X-Files is that the dynamic is supposed to be a firm believer in the occult and mysticism and all that spooky supernatural shit, Fox Mulder, is teamed up with Dana Scully, a skeptic. But by like the 3rd episode of the 1st season, Scully has already seen all kinds of spooky shit she can't explain, and she's still a skeptic. Like, in one episode, she gets kidnapped by aliens, and she's still like, but I don't know what I saw. And the longer the show goes on, the more hilarious that dynamic becomes, where she's like, look, maybe it's not ghosts. And Fox is like, but you've seen ghosts. Maybe it is.
There's that episode where Mulder believes that woman's got psychokinetic like powers, and it turns out it's just her boss who's a ghost, like an invisible man who's protecting her.
It's like, because I remember that one because I watched it the other day, and it is like Mulder is all in on it being psychic powers, and it turns out it's a ghost.
Yeah.
So it's like there's not even a rational, logical explanation. It's just ghosts happen.
Don't run the bath.
Get out of here!
One of my favourite moments from that episode, though, was when they watched the CCTV footage of that woman being mugged, and there's that, like, blurry figure behind her. They went to her house and said, like, they showed her the picture of him and said, do you know who this is? And it's just a blurry picture, and it's like, no one will know who that is. You can't see who it is.
Do you know this man?
Do you know this
No,
blob?
sorry, I don't.
Have you ever seen this person before? No.
I love the dynamic of that show because the longer it goes on, 'cause by like the third or fourth season, like Scully has seen every supernatural phenomenon under the sun. And I get that that's a result of the show being written in an era when you see one episode per week. Because when you binge X-Files, it's really funny because you'll have like one episode, Scully's like, I seen a ghost. There was a ghost right there, and she's really shaken by seeing this ghost. And in the next episode, she's like, I don't know what I saw. It's like, 30 seconds ago you said it was a ghost. But it gets even funnier, it's like with the character of Fox, because he's the one who, like, everything that gets presented to him, he's always like, it's a ghost. It's an alien. It's like a werewolf man. And it gets really funny. Like, again, after like 3 or 4 seasons, where, like, I think in one episode it's like, oh, a guy's truck breaks down, and it's aliens. And he's talking to Scully about it, and he goes, how would you explain this? And she goes, well, there was a freak lightning storm that night, so he could have shorted his truck out, which is a perfectly reasonable explanation. And Fox goes, huh, you would believe that, Scully. It's like, how is it more likely that aliens came down? And I know he lives in the X-Files universe where it's always aliens, but still, like him just going, huh, you would believe that, wouldn't you? It's like, well, it's a perfectly rational explanation. It's just as likely, if not more so, than fucking aliens did it.
Okay, so once again, bring it back to cigarette smoking man.
Yes, bring it away from aliens to cigarette smoking man.
Yeah, you said he was like the main overarching villain of the series.
Yeah, he's behind pretty much everything that happens on screen, and it's kind of impressive to consider that his very first appearance is him silently stood against a wall. I think in the first episode, where he doesn't actually say a word, he just stands there with this like glazed look on his face, smoking a cigarette, looking like he couldn't give less of a fuck. Like, he stands there like just a tired divorce lawyer hearing a couple argue about which of the limited edition Funko Pops they want to keep.
He had a nickname at the academy. Spooky Mulder.
And I think in the first season, he utters a grand total of 4 words, smattered between 2 different appearances, both of which he stood in the background. And he goes on to become the main overarching villain of the entire series. And a lot of fans back in the day have seen that, well, that's just good foreshadowing, isn't it? So you see, he's there from the very first episode, and then he comes back. And then he comes back, and then he comes back, and it's revealed that he had a hand in everything. And it turns out that wasn't the case at all. It was just pulled out of the writer's arses.
Alright, so what do you mean by that?
Well, as I mentioned, like, X-Files is, for the most part, a Monster of the Week show. Like, 70% of the episodes are standalone and just deal with a contained mystery that is solved by the end of that episode. And, like, 30% of them involve plot. And that was supposed to be the main plan for the show, with the idea being that we'll just keep making standalone Monster of the Week episodes until we run out of ideas. And then when we run out of ideas, we'll make another show. However, that plan was scuppered when Gillian Anderson got pregnant.
Okay, so what happened then?
Right, well, her being pregnant meant that she couldn't be in every episode, and the episodes that she could be in, she couldn't really do much. And at that point, the show was defined by the Mulder and Scully dynamic. And the writers were pulling their hair out, thinking, well, how do we write around Anderson being pregnant? It's like, and you'll notice if you watch the show in the second season, like, Scully's not there much. Or she'll appear, but she'll be like stood behind an autopsy table and she won't move, and that's like to cover a baby bump. And eventually a decision was reached, like, okay, we'll write her out for a couple episodes. And that will allow Anderson to go give birth and then come back at a later date. And the plot point they decided on to write Anderson out of the show was her being abducted. which I reckon must have been an absolute breeze for the heavily pregnant Anderson to film. Because it's
God.
like them dragging her across the floor as she's screaming. It's like, this is a pregnant lady!
Yeah.
Couldn't you just show it happening off screen? It's like, nah. And admittedly, there are a few other ways they could have handled that, but they settled on the abduction storyline. That became the first real plot thread of the X-Files, with the exception of the one of Mulder looking for his sister, which was a plot point they brought up and then abandoned seemingly on a whim. And I don't even remember if his sister's still alive, because I remember just not giving the faintest whiff of a shit by the 8th time it's brought up. So maybe there's a fact bar below to tell us what actually happened to Fox Mulder's sister, because I know that the show kept coming back. And I'd only watched the first couple of seasons as a kid, and then as an adult when I had Prime. And I was like, you know what? I'm taking a weekend to watch all of the X-Files.
Oh my God.
And got to the 4th season. Got to the 4th season and went, I think I'm done on the X-Files. But as mentioned, the kidnapping of Scully became the first real plot thread that was explored throughout multiple episodes in the X-Files. And while the writers would later admit they did enjoy writing episodes of the X-Files that had plot, they struggled to figure out a way to just write episodes that only had Mulder in them. Because, the show hinged on the dynamic between him and Scully. So what they did is they brought back characters from the first season and beefed up their roles, including Cigarette Smoking Man.
So that explains why Cigarette Smoking Man, came back and appeared in another episode, but how did he become the main villain?
Well, there's a couple of conflicting accounts about this, but my favourite one, and the one I choose to believe, is that and the actor who plays Cigarette Smoking Man, William B. Davis, was a prolific bit part actor. He was a guy you brought in to just stand in the background. He'd been on dozens, if not hundreds, of TV shows before. And to showcase this, whoever edits this video, go onto his IMDb page, just pick up some of his choice roles from before he appeared in the X-Files, and they're stuff like random background extra number 3 and shit like that. And the story goes that when they brought him back for season 2, they realised that he could act. Which sounds really bad, considering he was a professional actor for decades before appearing in the X-Files, but as I said, he was a bit part actor, so we never really got a chance to flex his acting chops, as it were. And the writers just kept bringing him back because they liked that actor. And as I said, that's just one version of the story. That's the one I choose to believe because it's kind of adorable. Oh, this guy can act, let's just bring him back, we like him. Well, the other one is just the writers just picked him at random and said, okay, he's the villain. And then it was just a happy coincidence that he ended up being able to act and ended up being such a popular fan character. And then again, there's other theories that the writers were reading internet message boards for theories about the show and just used those. People who worked on the X-Files have since gone on to say that Gillian Anderson becoming pregnant is one of the best things to happen to the show because prior to that happening, it was going to be a Monster of the Week show where just they solve mysteries across America. And after she became pregnant, it became a show with a plot. A plot they enjoyed writing and ended up adding a lot to the show, making it one of the most successful in television history. All because Gillian Anderson got pregnant. Not bad, eh?
So I think the best thing about the X-Files TV show is the theme song.
The theme song, yeah. I'm terrified about theme song because I watched the X-Files as a kid. And I think a lot of young boys, I was really all in on aliens and conspiracy theories. A lot of little kids, I think, but boys especially, get really just enamoured with the idea of aliens. And I remember this weird show about aliens being on TV. It was the X-Files, and I'd watch it late at night when I wasn't supposed to be up, watching TV with the volume turned really low.
Yeah.
But even with the volume turned low, I could still hear the do-do-do-do, and it shit me up. Because they'd have the montage, wouldn't have, the weird screamy face and the pictures of the UFOs. I'm like, is this real? I know it's not, but as a kid, is it real? It could be real.
Yeah, you don't know.
I was a little fox mole, oh my god, are aliens real? Is it aliens? And then when you're in bed, you have that moment where you're lying asleep at night and you hear just random noise in your house, it's a fucking alien.
Yeah, with you remember being a kid and being scared of the show, hearing that theme song, but I think a lot of young people these days, if they hear that, they probably think of all the Illuminati memes.
Yeah. They're funny, but they kind of ruin the show for me now, because I hear that theme song and I giggle, instead of it being, this is it's a really good tone setter for what the show's going for, because it's a little bit cheesy, but at the same time there is that spookiness to it, which I like about the show. And now I just watch it and I just see fucking guy in rubber costume, or all the memes about David Duchovny.
You know that game you'd play when you were a kid, it's that rainbow parachute, where you're sit around in a circle and you're wave this parachute.
The parachute into the air and run underneath.
Yeah. There's this one where this person's filming this kid just sat with this parachute and he disappears underneath it and they start playing the X-Files theme. so good.